are back.
We are back. What's up, everybody? Corey Singletary here with the Citizens Utility Board, and as always, my lovely co-host,
Tom Content, Citizens Utility Board.
It's been
Thanks for calling me lovely, by the way.
I didn't want
Back
that to be.
at ya.
I didn't want that to be the sole purview of your wife, right?
There you go.
But the last time we talked about the history of CUB a little bit, kind of who we are, why we exist as an organization.
That's right.
And you and I were talking, and we're in rate cases now. A bunch of utilities have filed for rate cases or rate adjustments for next year. And the last few go rounds on rate cases, we've been asked by a bunch of people, how do you guys look at these things? How do you go about your job as the consumer advocate representing residential and small business customers? Most of that's been in the context of settlements. How do you approach settlements?
How do you approach settlements?
But I think you and I both thought it would be interesting to kind of, pull back the curtain a little bit and to, give some folks, our thoughts on how we view our job as the consumer advocate. So I guess I'll kick it to you with that. How do you view your job? I mean, as our executive director, how do you view your job as the consumer advocate?
Well, I think first of all, it's so much of what we do has to come back to affordability and fairness. So it's affordability for customers, and it's also it's looking at everything we can through a lens of affordability not just for a statewide average, but affordability for all sorts of customers, and then fairness in terms of utility policies and attention to customers and what customer wants and needs in the utility space. So how can we enable customers to take more control of their energy costs and energy use? That's a framework we come at things, but and then beyond that, it's really a matter of follow the numbers, follow the data, and that's why we have you. That's why we have a regulatory team to actually dive into the nitty gritty of the cases to say, there's a lot here, but what's the tangible impact for customers? Because that's what it all boils down to.
And I think maybe taking those, in reverse order that you threw them out, a lot of times when you have, we talked about lobbying being sort of an analog to what we do in the regulatory space.
Right.
And a lot of times when you have folks advocating for a particular position, there's a very clear outcome objective that they're looking for, right? And one could argue that for us, the outcome is, you have mentioned affordability. Affordability is sort of part of the three-legged stool that people talk about in utility regulation of safety, reliability, and affordability. And when we look at, if those are our outcome objectives, a lot of folks would naturally think that for us, then whatever position we take is we're just gonna say whatever we need to get to that point. But I think because we don't lobby, we're not a lobbying organization. We do work primarily before a regulator, a technical regulator, administrative regulator on technical issues, that we do really just have to follow the numbers. We can't walk into a case and just say, this is what we think the outcome is, before really peeling things back and taking a look.
Yeah, I mean, I think at times in CUB's history, there's been a misperception or perception that we were an environmental organization because maybe we advocated for natural gas instead of coal and at various points along the way, and we did that from an economic point of view because we thought that was going to be cost effective for customers, but we don't have a predisposed view on that. I mean, I think it even comes down to I just got a contact from a CUB member saying, why there's the solar and battery project that you're raising questions about. Why is that? And it's like, well, it's a clean energy source, but you got to look at the big picture of what the devil's in the details of what do the do the economics and the modeling justify that expense? And that's something that obviously you and the team delved into.
Yeah, it's not all renewable projects are equal. They are not all built the same. They are not all priced the same. And another one that I think is one where people might think, well, where's CUB coming from on this? But where really we let the numbers, or in the absence of numbers, at least sound theory and sound logic, kind of walk us through that from logic from the perspective of a utility consumer advocate and a utility customer, is on the issue of the credit rates that are paid to small customer-owned generation. Right before the commission right now, the commission is looking at what are colloquially referred to as the parallel generation rates. And
okay, now we have to say that in English.
Parallel it's the rates that customers who own rooftop solar. Really, these rates are for customers, like bigger customers, like businesses, large industrial customers who have big installations of solar or maybe even wind, battery electric storage now or in the future. But those customers, when they push electricity back onto the grid, are credited for those deliveries to the utility, and those rates are approved by the commission. And we have filed comments in proceedings, like investigations before the commission. We filed testimony in rate cases, generally supportive of credit rates that are higher than, I'll just come right out, that are richer than what are currently on the books. But we don't come at it from the perspective of our objective is to support the renewable industry. Our perspective is, if the rates aren't set equal to the value that those systems bring to the grid, that they bring to all customers, then customers will be less likely to make those investments themselves. These small businesses, large businesses, or even small customers, they're not going to make the investment because they're not going to get enough money over the long term through those rates. And all other customers lose out on the benefit of having those renewable systems on the grid. And so for us, it's, to your point, it's follow the numbers, right? For us, we don't want to have customers leave money on the table. We don't want there to be opportunities for there to be savings in the future that we miss because the rates are set incorrectly. And so again, that's a matter of following the numbers, still starting from the standpoint of safe, affordable, and reliable, but not having, the outcome objective. We can get to the same place as a renewable advocate, but we didn't get there by saying, well, we want to figure out how to come up with a framework that supports small scale generation. Right.
Certainly the massive drop in price of solar energy has made it the one of the go-to options right now for utilities, and it's also something that more and more customers are looking at too. And I think that when you talk about the value to the grid, I think that's something that too often gets overlooked when people think about solar, is the value to the grid that not just those big utility solar projects are providing, but also the customer-owned generation projects that are solar as well.
Yeah, sorry, I was just looking at the gain on the microphones. Oh, well, I'll fix it in post.
That's what you said last time.
That's what I said last time, and I did. Yeah, maybe switching gears a little bit. So the enactment of the settlements law several years ago,
yes,
has thrown a little bit of a wrinkle in historically how we do most of our work most of the time, which is usually we put the pads on, we get in there with experts and attorneys, and we do discovery to ask questions of the utility, and we file testimony, and we argue it out on paper and let the commission decide.
Yeah, it's the jumping up and down and fight, and oppose, and challenge every challenge in more of a litigated process. And now the tables are turned with that 2018 law.
Yeah, and what the law does is it basically, requires that all parties, seek settlement where practicable.
Yeah, right? The legislature's encouraging settlements.
Yeah,
so we're working across the table more than ever before.
So in that situation where we're trying to negotiate in good faith, to see if there are opportunities to settle issues, how do you view how we sort of, have historically approached that?
You mean in the settlements that we've done so far?
In the settlements we've done so far, and in the settlement process, like, looking at, in that negotiation process, how do we work through that to try to answer the question, what's the best outcome for the customers?
Right, and what's the best outcome for customers? I mean, I think we're always looking to see on if you can lower the cost, the bottom line cost for all customers compared to what was proposed in the rate application. And then if you can layer on other benefits for customers through utility, through specialized programs for residential customers, or address issues of concern for residential customers or small business customers through the settlement, then that's something we look for. But I think one of the things that we always have to do is in order to get to a settlement, the outcome of that case has to be as good or actually arguably better than the outcome we'd get from litigating it all the way to the end. And that's always in the back of my mind, and that's something I think that is in the back of your mind too.
Yeah, I mean, because those are the paths, right? Is either the parties come to a settlement and we come to agreement on what the resolution of the issues are or is, or ultimately ends up going, to the commission. And in those situations, I'm going to pause for just a second. There's someone knocking at the door, which is very interesting.
Someone's knocking at the door.
That was the quietest and most polite knocking ever. Trying again. What I was saying is, yeah. So there's two paths, right? Ultimately, it maybe the parties come to settlement, right? And we present to the commission essentially this package, saying, here's how if you sign off, you bless this settlement, the case is done, and we sort of resolved all the issues, in theory, right? The other path is we can't come to an agreement, and it just goes the normal way. It goes before the commission, and we, litigate, and we fight. And, it's a question of leverage. It's a question of risk. When we're looking at this is, do we think on an issue, I'm just going to take a hypothetical issue. I'm not going to name it because otherwise someone's going to pick on us for something. But on a particular issue, the question we have to ask ourselves is, if we took this all the way to the commission and presented our best argument on this issue and what we would like to see to the commission, is it more or less likely that we would get it from the commission than we would get what the utility is offering in settlement?
Right. It comes down to will 2 or 3 commissioners agree with our position on this?
Yeah, and that's always been a tricky part, right? Because you're not only negotiating with the other party, you're trying to. There's a little bit of game. You're trying to predict the future and trying to anticipate what would be viewed favorably before the commission, and so you're looking at sort of past precedent, the decision the commissioners have made in the past. What they've said publicly at open meetings, and sometimes it's what they've said publicly at open meetings and then what they've ultimately voted on. And we have to take all that into consideration on top of the evidence that we can get, the information the utility shares with us, the information that we can pull together through those settlement negotiations. And it's not easy.
Yeah, no, it's not as easy as just saying, let's make a deal. And the challenge we have sometimes is that I'm not saying this very well, but the challenge we have is you have to not just try to make a deal, but you have to try to come up with something that you think is going to be not only amenable to you, but it's also going to survive through all the other parties signing on too.
Yeah. And that's I know that that makes it sound like that maybe we just give away the store, right? Like we might feel like the commission is not really going to give us a fair shake, and we just take whatever we get. But at the end of the day, for us, it is still that litmus test of, to call it a litmus test is what we're getting through settlement at least as good as what we think we would get through litigation. And, you know, there are some sort of bedrock principles that we're pretty certain the commission is probably not going to violate. And, you know, while it sometimes feels like when we do litigate things, the utilities get whatever they want, you know, the utilities don't get to run the table in settlement negotiations.
Exactly. I mean, there's no running the table should not be an option in any kind of case. But that's clearly what you bring up is significant there, and it is interesting. I think people when we say settlements, people think of litigation, but actually settlements is actually the process of compromise, the process of coming to a deal. It's more like negotiating a deal rather than settling a lawsuit. People often think of settling as settling a lawsuit, and it's a little bit different context.
I mean, essentially what we're doing in settlement is instead of letting the commission pick the compromise solution, we're trying to negotiate what that compromise solution is,
right,
between the parties. And a lot of it comes down to, you know, are the parties negotiating in good faith? Are they being sort of open and transparent to the extent that, you know, is practicable and is helpful to the settlement negotiations? And we've had settlements that have been, from our perspective, really easy, and we've had ones that have been less so, and have been more challenging to really come to that decision. And there have been times, I remember at least two instances, but probably more. I'm probably just blocking them out. But I vividly remember at least two instances where you and I went round and round of like, do we sign on to this?
Right.
Right.
No, these aren't easy calls. And I think one of the things that I think when the legislature decided to encourage settlements, I think there was some concern that are we at the commission, that is the PSC being, you know, is their role of the PSC being somehow diminished in this process? And I think it's important to talk about the role of the staff of the PSC and the audit of the PSC, because as CUB, we don't have the ability to do the kind of in-depth audit of the utilities applications that the PSC staff can, and neither does any of the regular kind of usual suspect stakeholder groups involved at the PSC. So it's one of the ways the implementation of the settlements law has evolved is you're seeing the commission allowing the full audit of the utilities financials to proceed.
Yeah, and actually, this is a little bit of a tangent, but we were actually literally talking about this when we were walking back in the office. Is
right,
as a practical consideration, while I'm sure the laws vary from state to state, but you know, since we're not, you know, part of the commission, right? We're not part of the AG's office. You know, we're a normal intervening party like everyone else, which does confer its own benefits sometimes, but we also then are limited on the number of questions we can ask the utility, which may be surprising to people. In most circumstances, we can ask the utility 25 questions about a particular case.
Choose carefully.
Yeah, and imagine trying to make that choice when it's a full rate case, the fully litigated rate case, when everything is on the table, from the amount, in theory, the amount the utility spends on copy paper to what kind of power plants they're seeking a recovery for, or, you know, the expense, you know, their uncollectibles expenses, or anything else that they're looking at,
or policies on distributed generation. You name it, it's all rolled into each case.
Yeah,
the rate cases rolls up so many issues across the policy spectrum and the spending spectrum.
Yeah, so
at the same time.
Yeah, so as a practical matter, we have to pick and choose in litigation, which presents its own challenges, and that's I know sometimes, you know, we get asked after the fact, well, why didn't you address this issue, or why didn't you address this other topic that is very important to me as a customer or me as a member of the public? Right. And sometimes it's just, as a practical matter, we can't deal with, we can't touch everything.
Right. And so we have that 25 question limitation, but what's the limitation on PSA staff?
In theory, unlimited. You know, when I was on staff, and it was a little bit of an adjustment when I came over here. When I worked on commission staff, I picked up the phone or sent an email and said, "Hey, I'm working on this case. I need to know this. I need to know, give me a spreadsheet with this information." And, staff's ability to, do data requests is what they're called over there. It's not discovery, but they're data requests. Is so unconstrained that it never occurred to me in the 7 years I worked at the commission that I ever had to check with someone else that we had exceeded some number of questions.
Some arbitrary limit?
Some arbitrary limit. And the other part, which people probably aren't aware of, is that generally speaking, the response time is shorter. The expectation is that the utility will respond to commission staff much quicker than they will to general party discovery. So we have a role to play in that, since we're parties, we can advocate for particular positions.
Right.
And, we've talked about how we the lens that we view that through, but, just because we now have more staff and that type of thing, no one should think that there isn't a need for commission staff, in this process, because their presence allows us to do what we need to do, which is to focus on, the biggest and most important issues to customers in any given case.
Yeah. No, I did want to highlight the value of a strong and dedicated PSC staff as part of this, because there may be a perception out there that, now we've got the settlements law. What's the role of staff now? And I think they're indispensable.
Yeah. I mean, the other part is we've done basic settlements basically for the past 4 years on every single major rate case, and one or two small ones that have come before the commission.
True.
And with the big utilities, the reason that's been kind of, easy, call it that, is because I think we've talked about it before in some other circumstance. It's been easy because there's been all of these sort of tax credits from the change to the tax law several years ago during the Trump administration. And we've been able to sort of ride that out. And it's been able to make it so we could come to settlements where there have been no rate increases. And it's real easy to agree on things when there's no rate increase.
Yeah, the path to a settlement, a zero is a clear path to a settlement. And it became a lot harder in the 2021 settlements when the zeros went away and turned into number increases, and that's going to be a challenge going forward too.
Which is not to say that even when the utility came in and presented, no increase, that we were just like, yep, that sounds good, and let's sign on the dotted. We're always, some commissioners have commented on this, that things like deferred tax credits, being able to roll money forward to offset increases, applying fuel credits, which we've supported from time to time, of taking fuel over collection money and applying it to offset rate increases. All of that hides the underlying upward pressure on the utility side, the upward pressure on their rates, where you could think about it. If you took those credits away, what would the quote unquote real rate be? Right. And so when we do, even with these sort of no increase settlements, we negotiate as strongly as we can to try to make certain that all the other little input parameters, all the things that feed into the final rates, are as clean as they can be, and are as low as we can, reasonably push them, and that there isn't just sort of unnecessary fat hanging out in the rates.
Yeah, that's a key. I think the prime example of those credits masking increases was when the Point Beach nuclear plant was sold, and there were credits that came back to customers of the utility that owned it, We Energies, but at the same time, that's when the major increase linked to the new coal plant in Elm Road coal plant was hitting rates, and so it all happened at the same time, so that the actual impact of the coal plant was masked by those credits.
Yeah. I think you just brought up not Point Beach, but you just brought up nuclear power, and maybe next week we can talk about Kewaunee, because we anticipate the commission tomorrow or today, when this will go out, will be taking up an issue related to the Kiwani plant. So
Yeah, we'll come back to the Kiwani and nuclear questions. Yep.
yeah, there's always something. So before we go, just a reminder for folks to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Follow us on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform. Any last minute plugs? Someone might listen to this before Wednesday. What do we got going on?
Oh, before Wednesday, yeah, we've got a webinar for small business customers starting at noon Wednesday the 18th. CUB's joined by the Conservative Energy Forum, Sustainable Business Council, and Be Local Wisconsin. A lot of resources and tools for businesses to consider when they're managing their energy costs and their footprint.
Cool. That sounds like fun, and we'll try to get this. We'll try to get this out, and maybe you'll get one more registration.
There you go. We're doing okay on registrations, but we'll have it available after the fact. We'll make it available through various platforms, the slides for those who couldn't attend. But it'd be great if people hop on.
All right. Cool. All right.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. We'll catch you all in the next one.